An old tungsten lamp was hung by black wires in the middle of the room, flickering dimly. The quiet atmosphere was like ink dripping into clear water, spreading in the room. In the center of the room stood a large round table, which looked mottled. In the center of the table stood a small clock with a very complicated pattern, which was ticking at the moment. Around the table sat 10 people in different clothes. Their clothes looked a little shabby, and their faces were covered with a lot of dust. Some of them lay on the table, and some sat on their backs in chairs, all sleeping soundly. Next to these 10 people stood a man wearing a goat head mask and a black suit. His eyes came out from the shabby goat head mask and stared at the 10 people with interest. The clock on the table rang, and the minute hand and the hour hand pointed to 12 at the same time. A low bell sounded from a far place outside the room. At the same time, the 10 men and women sitting around the round table slowly woke up. After they gradually woke up, they looked around in confusion, and then looked at each other in confusion. It seemed that no one remembered why they were here. "Good morning, 9 of you." The goat head spoke first. "I'm glad to meet you here. You have been sleeping in front of me for 12 hours. The man in front of them was dressed so strangely that he scared everyone in the dim light. His mask seemed to be made of a real goat head, and many of the hairs had turned yellow and black, and were knotted and stuck together. 2 holes were dug at the eyes of the goat mask, revealing his cunning eyes. His every move not only exuded the unique smell of goats, but also a faint smell of decay. A man with tattooed arms was stunned for a few seconds before he finally realized the irrationality of this matter. He asked Goathead hesitantly, "Who are you? I believe you all have this question, so I will introduce it to the 9 of you." Goathead waved his hands happily, and it seemed that he had prepared the answer long ago. A young man named Qi Xia sat farthest from Goathead. He quickly looked around the room, and after a moment, his expression became solemn. "Strange. This room is really strange. There is no door here, and there are walls on all sides." In other words, the surroundings, roof, and floor of this room are all closed, but there is a table in the middle of the room. In this case, how did they get here? Could it be that they sent people here first, and then built the wall? Qi Xia looked around again. Whether it was the floor, wall, or ceiling, there were all horizontal and vertical lines, which divided the wall and the ground into many large squares. Another thing that concerned Qi Xia was the 9 mentioned by the goat head. No matter how you count, there are 10 people sitting around the round table. Including the goat head himself, there are 11 people in the room. What does 9 mean? He reached out and touched his pocket. As expected, his cell phone had been taken away. "No need to introduce yourself to us," a cold woman said to the goat head. "I advise you to stop your behavior as soon as possible. I suspect that you have detained us for more than 24 hours, which constitutes the crime of illegal detention. Every word you say now will be recorded and will form evidence against you." While she was speaking, she rubbed the dust off her arms in disdain, as if she hated being dirty more than being imprisoned. The cold woman's words really sobered everyone up. No matter who the other party was, he dared to kidnap 10 people alone, which was against the bottom line of the law. "Wait." A middle-aged man in a white coat interrupted everyone's thoughts. He slowly looked at the cold woman and asked, "We just woke up. How do you know we were imprisoned for 24 hours? His tone was steady and powerful, but it hit the nail on the head. The cold woman pointed to the clock on the table calmly, and replied, "The clock here points to 12 o'clock, but I have the habit of going to bed late. The last time I looked at the clock at home, it was 12 o'clock, which means we were imprisoned for at least 12 hours." After she finished speaking, she pointed to the walls around her and continued, "You should have discovered that there is no door in this room, which means that this person took some effort to get us into this room. He said that we have been sleeping for 12 hours. Now, the clock points to 12 o'clock again, which means that it has turned at least twice. So I suspect more than 24 hours. Is there a problem?" After hearing this answer, The white coat looked at the woman coldly, and there was still suspicion in his eyes. After all, in this environment, this woman is too calm. Would a normal person say this calmly in the face of such kidnapping? At this time, a strong young man in a black t-shirt asked, "Goathead, why are there 10 people here, but you said there are 9? Goathead was silent and did not answer immediately. "Fen Chang, I don't care how many people are here." The man with tattooed arms cursed and tried to stand up by supporting the table, but found that his legs were too weak to use any strength. So he could only continue to point at Goathead and said, "Fen Chang, I advise you to be sensible. You may not know how serious the consequences of provoking me are. I will really take your life." After these words, the expressions of the men present gradually became serious. At this time, there really needed to be a leader. If they could subdue the Goathead together, the situation would still be under control. But everyone found that their legs seemed to have been injected with something, and they were completely powerless at this time. So they could only threaten the Goathead with words and yell loudly. Qi Xia did not speak, but stroked his chin with his hand. He stared at the clock on the table, thinking. Things did not seem as simple as imagined. He knew that the Goathead was talking about 9 participants. If there were 10 people here, it could only prove that one of them was not a participant. Who is Hethan? There were 5 men and 5 women sitting in this room. Could one of them be a kidnapper? The Goathead stopped talking, slowly came to Qi Xia, and stood behind a young man. Everyone followed his gaze and found that the young man in front of them was different from everyone else present. Although his face was also dirty, he was filled with a happy smile. The goat-headed man slowly raised his palm and placed it on the back of the young man's head. The young man's smile became more and more weird. He looked at everyone excitedly, and it seemed that he had known something for a long time. With a muffled sound, the goat-headed man slammed the young man's head hard on the table. The pink and white stuff spread horizontally on the table like spilled paint, and blood spots gradually appeared on everyone's face. The young man's head was smashed to pieces on the table. Outside the room, a distant bell sounded again. Qi Xia was very close to the dead. He felt an unknown object stuck to his face, warm and sticky. He asked himself if his psychological quality was strong enough, but he didn't expect to tremble at this moment. The girl sitting on the right side of the dead was stunned for 3 seconds, and finally, her face was distorted and she screamed. This scream tore through everyone's psychological defenses. Can the goat head still be a human if he can smash the hardest human skull on the table with his hands? How can his thin body burst out such powerful strength? The goat head slowly said, "The reason why I prepared 10 people is because I want to use one of them to calm you down."